Hey folks, MasakoX here. I would like to point you all to my newly refreshed Patreon at patreon.com/MasakoX, just to make sure the channel can keep on chugging along. Thank you very much for your time, and let's get on to the story.
Ooh, it's spooky month, everyone!
And using that, we shall discuss some of the spooky elements in Dragon Ball. Last time, we tackled the Ozaru origin story as an expansion of the classic werewolf trope, but that's not every instance of the ghoulish and the ghastly occurrences that we've seen in the series, so let's take a look through some more. The most abundant period for such occurrences is the original series, and we can point at multiple examples. First and foremost, we have fortune teller Baba and her wacky gang of gimmicky martial arts practitioners who are references to classic horror tropes or even specific characters. First, of course, we have Fangs the Vampire, and I hope that you fang me for reminding you, who's a pretty original take on the classic formula, as he seems to be the practitioner of Muay Thai, which is basically Thai martial arts and full contact sport, which makes use of fists, elbow, knees, and shins. For those of you that know Street Fighter, it's basically Sagat's trademark fighting style. And during his fight with Krillin, he even performs a dance known as Wai Kru. It's a ritual connected to Muay Thai, where the fighter does demonstrate his gratitude toward his family and mentors. But that's not the only interesting chestnut about Fangs, as he seems to be immune to sunlight despite being a vampire, which in most sources is the weakness of vampires. Well, in one, it makes them sparkle, but we're not going to be talking about that one. But the next character on our list is also quite interesting. See through the Invisible Man. I mean, kinda, because his main gimmick, well, is he's invisible. His horror origins are much more interesting. As some of you know, The Invisible Man is a science fiction classic written by none other than H.G. Wells, published in 1897. The main character, referred to as Griffin, is able to successfully render himself invisible, but is unable to revert the process. He is, however, far from a traditional protagonist, as he goes on to commit crimes and is generally a violent and unlikable man. The Invisible Man had many adaptations and uses in different media, but arguably the most well-known is the one from the 1933 epic directed by James Whale, featuring Claude Rains as the titular character. But overall, there have been about 9 main movie adaptations, including one from 2020, multiple TV shows and other media, which is either referencing the original or straight up features the character. Notably, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the comic book series. It seems like the original is much more interesting than the DB reference. Oh well, he was a minor character anyway. Next one, of course, is Bandages the Mummy, which is just a generic idea of an animated mummy, with some wrestling moves in his repertoire. He is, I think, most likely a reference to the 1932 classic movie The Mummy, directed by Karl Freund, which featured Boris Karloff as the titular mummy or Imhotep. You can kind of see Bandages resembling the general idea of the character. Note that most of the scary animated mummy tropes that you've ever seen in your lives are most likely inspired by that movie specifically. And to close off the quartet, we of course have Spike the Devilman. Obviously, this fella is also a reference to the series Devilman by Go Nagai, featuring of course a titular anti-hero teenager, Akira Fudo, acquiring the demonic powers in order to fight hidden monstrous threats to humanity on even terms. Spike himself, though, is most well known for his Devilmite Beam, a technique which turns an opponent's negative thoughts against them, and therefore is really effective against evil opponents. Good guys, like Goku, not so much. Fans were speculating if this would work well against the likes of later Z villains, and in February of 2005 V-Jump, it printed Toriyama's answer to said question. Translation credit, as always, goes to Herms. The Z fighters have defeated plenty of evildoers, but wouldn't it have just been easier to have just the Devilman beat them with the Devilmite Beam? And Toriyama does go on to reply, I think it probably wouldn't hit them, and it was no longer that level of battle. Yikes, okay, that was pretty cut and dry. There you go. In this case, we have an official answer from the author. And although it didn't stop us from considering that option, in one of our own special what ifs, and we even included a story featuring Spike on the channel. In any case, these four are not the only ones to refer to horror tropes and staples. We also have Man-Wolf, who has a bone to pick with Master Roshi. Sorry, I meant Jackie Chun, who destroyed the moon and caused him to be stuck in his wolf-like form for all eternity, due to him being a reverse werewolf who turns into a human while seeing a full moon. So a nice little subversion of tropes, classic Toriyama. We have also discussed lycanthropy in greater detail last year, so we're not going to be spending too much time on it here. Additionally, there is Android 8, or Eta, whose design is very clearly an homage to Frankenstein's monster from, well, the whole Frankenstein spiel. Although the original version titled Frankenstein or The Modern Prometheus by Mary Shelley is a staple of Gothic novels that debuted in 1818, we think that Toriyama based his particular design of the gentle android from the version of the creature that we could see in the 1931 movie adaptation. Can you see what we're getting at here? He very much likes 1930s horror. And that featured, of course, the monster played by Boris Karloff. And if you think about the monster, you most likely imagine this guy's face in the makeup. That's right. This prolific actor started his horror career in this movie. This was the breakout role, which considered to be one of the more iconic roles within his repertoire. And knowing that Toriyama was somewhat of a cinephile, especially when it comes to classic sci-fi and horror flicks like this, it's no wonder that he used Karloff's likeness as his inspiration for two of his characters. Now, this isn't everything, as we can look to a certain movie for something more classic. As we mentioned, Fangs the Vampire wasn't your typical take on Dracula, but that does not mean that Dragon Ball didn't feature something closer towards said trope. And for that, I think you can understand where we're going, to the second Dragon Ball movie. No, we're not talking about World's Strongest, we're talking about Sleeping Princess in Devil's Castle and its villain Lucifer, who was designed by Minoru Maeda. And whilst Lucifer technically is a demon and the origin of the name is quite obvious, he does have those qualities that we traditionally associate with the Count that debuted in Bram Stoker's novel of the same name in 1897. From the perspective of time, it is interesting to look at Maeda's quote about the character that was included in the Dragon book that was included in the Dragon Box DVD release circa 2005. This time translation credit goes to Kanzenshu itself. Lucifer, the Lord of Devil Castle. At first sight, he has a gentlemanly air, but he has a terrifying true face. He seems to be proficient at hand-to-hand combat and has skill on par with Goku. In terms of his image, I suppose it's Sally the Witch's father. Laughs, like with the shape of his hair. I made him a handsome man due to the nature of the tale, but this type of villain may actually be pretty rare in Dragon Ball. And signed Minoru Maeda. Well, considering Mr. Perfect Cell's handsome jaw that don't lie, or Zamasu's soft look, this statement may look weird, but at the same time, things were kind of different at the beginning of Dragon Ball, as you could probably imagine. And also, for those of you who don't know what Sally the Witch is, it's the magical girl series that started in 1966 and was written and illustrated by Mitsuteru Yokoyama. And while it wasn't technically the first magical girl that appeared in the manga form, its anime from 1966 was what kickstarted the genre. And yeah, you can kind of see some resemblances of Mr. Yumeno, Sally's father and ruler of the magical kingdom, to Lucifer. Although it is clear that the vampire angle is more pronounced with this villain in particular. Also, to all of you that know that the meaning of the name Lucifer is basically the bringer of light, it must be really funny to know that his goal was to blow up the sun. Yeah. And as Dragon Ball continued, these horror references became a little bit more obscure, considering that characters started to have more and more original designs once Toriyama got the flow down. We could see it in the designs of both Cybermen and Biomen, clearly inspired by 1955's This Island Earth, Aliens, as well as the xenomorph form of Frieza. And whilst not exactly considered to be horror, Major Metallotron is a clear homage to Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator, and the premise of Future Trunks' story, it's basically its sequel. Imperfect Cell also seems to have those more general horror roots and tropes. We almost had another vampiric villain if you think about it. You see, originally, the 12th movie, which we in the West known as Dragon Ball Z BoJack Unbound, was supposed to feature a group of vampiric opponents. They even made it through the trailer. And while we don't know if they were meant to replace BoJack and his crew, do keep in mind that the original title was Dragon Ball Z Ginga Giri Giri, Buchigiri no Sugoi Yatsu. Literally, Dragon Ball Z, the galaxy at the brink, the super incredible guy, which is kind of a normal thing with these Japanese titles when you think about it. For example, Cooler's Revenge is The Incredible, Strongest versus Strongest, and Lord Slug is just Super Saiyan Son Goku. Sadly, we don't know anything about those vampires from the trailer, other than apparently Gohan, Krillin, and Trunks will be forced to take them on, which is kind of what happened in BoJack anyway with different characters. We also had a lot of mad scientists that have been a staple of horrors, with the aforementioned Dr. Frankenstein being the blueprint of all your Jiros, your Wheelos, your Raichis, your Mius, your Hedos and such. It's pretty much just take your pick. And our protagonist also had to fight two notable kaijus in the form of Hirudegan and Cell Max. And considering how gigantic, pun intended, this genre is in Japan, this really isn't that surprising. And I think out of all the villains, the first one, Hirudegan, that's probably the most terrifying. And of course, it would also be a waste not to mention Dragon Ball's attempts at zombies and mass mind control, as we have the whole Blackwater Mist shenanigan to discuss, as well as the body snatcher-esque escapades of Baby in Dragon Ball GT. As you can probably tell, horror is very much part of Dragon Ball's overall makeup. And although the more classic zombie trope has been used quite recently, starting in Superhero and going through into its prequel saga in the manga, Dr. Hedo does use his scientific powers to create both Alpha and Beta series of androids by reviving corpses. Though, much like their creator, they seem to be more misguided than truly evil, and at the end of the story, they actually get reunited with their families, so they actually get a happy ending. And obviously, that's not everything, as a lot of these inspirations have been moved into the background, and some of the more monstrous participants of the Tournament of Power are exerting some clear classic monster vibes, particularly Universes 9 and 4, so that was a nice little treat, but it was a blink and you'll miss it sort of thing. But it is clear that Toriyama and other creators of Dragon Ball did like their horror and horror sci-fi flicks, as they frequently referenced them in the series, especially at the beginning. I mean, it shouldn't surprise us. Yes, the Kung Fu genre was the most direct seed that started the Dragon Ball train off, but Toriyama was never shy of admitting that he pulled stuff out of things that he enjoyed from other genres that had nothing to do with martial arts. And maybe because of that, Dragon Ball can be viewed from so many different angles, as in many ways it's an excellent pastiche and collage of different pop cultural elements from different cultural backgrounds. Anyway, that's it for today. What did you folks think? Did we forget something? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I will see you in the next video. Catch you later!